So welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, the NBC network, with your host, Hurricane H. New day, new show, awesome topic with a great discussion and a great guest. Today's guest is Max Weigand, a positive psychologist and the creator of Psychosomatic Intelligence, also known as PSQ. At 17, Max achieved his dream of qualifying for the German national team. Now, that's pretty cool stuff. But just days later, he found himself feeling empty. That moment sparked a deeper question. Why doesn't success equal fulfillment? That's a good question. But, that moment really, is an interesting moment. And for the past 13 years, he's been decoding the answer through or throughout, I would say, neuroscience psychology and the real world performance, working with the Olympics or Olympic athletes, CEOs, and elite teams. Today, he teaches a powerful system that aligns the mind, subconscious, and nervous system to eliminate self sabotage and unlock true performance. Max, welcome to the show, man.
Wow, thank you so much for the great intro.
Well, that doesn't do justice, brother. There's a lot there, and but so first things first. I mean, I have to say this. 17, achieving a dream at 17, I think it's a dream in its own. Because I believe most of people don't even start dreaming of success, until way past that point. And I can tell you, some people may be in the midlife crisis and still haven't figured that out. And by the way, it's never too late. There's not a critic to that. It's just that when I hear somebody that's at that early age, kind of like had a set of goals or a goal that is success for them, and they achieve it, that is a big deal. And I want you to start telling the audiences about your journey because, again, this is an international show. This is for all age groups, but success is a big deal. Fulfilling dreams and success is another one. Your work is awesome. Olympics and athletes and CEOs and elites, big stuff. But let's talk about your journey. How you got into this in the first place, in psychology, that's the other one. And then your system, the PSQ, we're going to talk about that. But take us through the journey from the beginning, man, the whole entry point where you got into all this. And you still look you're very young, so I don't know how old you are now,
I'll take
but
that.
you
You,
whatever
you
it
know,
is, it's
you know,
working.
I was a weird kid. My family likes to joke. I never went through puberty, right? So I never had that time where most teenagers they kind of seek whether it's alcohol or drugs or kind of acting out or partying. I was never into that. I was miserable at the time. Growing up, most of my teenagers I spent in debilitating depression, anxiety, and loneliness. I was anxious to even talk, two words in front of my own family. And so I thought that, for me, the only way out at the time that I could picture back in my youthful ignorance was this idea that if I could become a professional runner, if I could win races filled with stadiums of clapping fans, if I could set records, then maybe I could find some self-love, some worthiness, and finally feel good about myself. And so in that way, I was very lucky, as you say, from, when I was 17 to make that dream come true. And I still remember I was walking off the track with tears running down my face because all of those years of sacrifice had finally, in one moment, paid off. And I woke up the next day and I finally felt as good as I'd always wanted. And I was like, whoa, this is what life is supposed to feel like: peaceful, calm, there's joy, there's presence. And again, the next day and the next. And then 3 days later, I woke up and I looked around and I looked down at my body and I realized I was back to normal. I was back to where I'd always been. All those years of pushing and sacrificing my school grades and friends and social life and everything, they had paid off for 3 days. But then my happiness had, plummeted just as back as I'd risen before. Jim Carrey has this great quote. He says, I wish more people could attain all the success and the money they want so they realize it's not the answer. And that was exactly my experience. And that moment changed me forever because I realized in that moment I could no longer outrun myself. And that no matter how much I would ever achieve in my life, I can never find lasting peace and self-love if I didn't turn inwards. And so that's really what set me on this path of psychology. And one of the first things that I learned was that the experience that I had, and that probably most of our listeners had at some point, it can be in those big moments, It can also be, I bought this new phone or this new car or this new clothes, and I thought I would feel really excited. And then 3 days later, it's just a phone, right? It's just a car. It's just a new partner. It's just a new house. It's just a new job. So the experience is what researchers call hedonic adaptation, which basically means that our brain is incredibly good at adapting to external things. So research shows that the moment I buy that house or get that promotion or find a partner, like my brain begins adapting and again down regulating the happiness that I felt in the beginning. And so chasing happiness on the outside is then a losing strategy because no matter how much you achieve, there's always a next thing around the corner.
Max, I'm listening to you. It's funny, but you actually, I think you answered a question that I had for many years, and I've always made the statement that, listen, I had my dreams as an early kid in high school, and I kind of achieved those dreams, one after the other. I mean, it was the American dream, going to Disney, working in Florida, then making it into the corporate world, and having my own house, and at early age, I did all the stuff that you would probably think as what we were conditioned to think as kids, right? Coming from overseas to the U.S. is the big thing, right? And it's a big deal.
Yes, literally,
Uh,
you're the living American dream.
I did. But here's the thing: what is the American dream? Eventually, to your point, you get to the point where it's just it's not a hoax. It's just what it is. It's really just part of life. You gotta do stuff. It's like a motivation. I would say it keeps you motivated. You have a target, eyes on the prize, kind of thing. But that's about it. You achieve each one of them, they just become dull, and that's it. And I've always asked that question, and most people, when I tell them this, and I make this joke to people, and they look at me with like their three heads, I say, "Oh, it's just a Benz, it's just a Porsche, it's just and they look at you like, "Are you really serious? I mean, really? Like, oh, you must be like." I mean, recently I had a discussion with someone. We happened. I don't own a Rolls Royce, but we had a ride in one, and you know, all my life, people are like Rolls Royce is the car, right? I mean, literally, I got in the car. I wasn't that impressed, and people until today they're gonna tell me like, they probably joke, on the comments on this show, but I wasn't impressed. I mean, I got impressed with a Porsche. I wasn't impressed with the Rolls Royce. Someone can say, well, maybe you're not a luxury guy. Maybe I'm not. Because to me, luxury is just another thing, right? It's just not another
Gets you from A
position.
to
But
B, right? It does the job.
well, no, I mean but don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful car.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
it's nice. The comfort is there. Everything's there. But you know, I guess after a while in life, it's very hard to get impressed by things. And to what you've actually stated it well. I mean, you've kind of discovered it. You gave also the Jim Carrey, quote or saying that if you did it all, what's there really to impress you? Like, I mean, especially you travel a lot around the world, right? I mean, I know you're in Italy right now. You're from Germany. You've been all over the place. So when you travel around, you see a lot of things. And for the average person who has not left their hometown, they know what they see on TV, on social media, and that's the limitation. You've experienced different foods, cultures, places, mountains, nature, luxuries, all kind of stuff, and they became just like, yeah. To your point, like 3 days later, it's like, okay. I mean, you can have the biggest house, and the next day, once you live in it a couple of days, you don't even see that house the way you used to see it before. And then people are looking outside. Oh my God, look what he's living. Or oh my God, he's got a castle, he's got a mansion, he's got this beautiful place. Again, cars, houses, these are like the positions that everybody kind of wants to have. Even titles, you know, you want to be a manager, you're a manager. Okay, cool. Now I'm a manager. Nothing. You want to be a director, now you're direct. You want to be a VP, you want to be a chief, you want a president. You get these like this is true story. I got to a point in my life where I had, a chief status, like, C-suite level. And there were people literally, I give them the card and they look at it like, maybe I had an expectation for them to be impressed, but there was no impression there because they didn't even
Just
know what
like
the title
bowing
meant.
down on their knees and
No, no, no. It's funny because the title, I'm like, I'm the chief sales and marketing officer. Okay, and I got it. It's on that. So I was not,
Mhm.
critical to it. It just I figured like it doesn't mean anything. It's
Yeah.
it's really what it means for you, not what it means for people. Some people may, oh my God, but some people like, okay, whatever. It's just another title on a piece of paper. So and I don't mind. I just want to kind of share this because it's something I've always wanted to ask, and you just hit on the money there because I need to understand the psychology of this. Why do we have that? Why do we? And then you gave a technical term there. Why do just when you have all these goals and you get to them, they become simple, nothing special. I mean, that can you expand on that, like literally in that concept? Because
Absolutely.
I think for people, for those who have achieved stuff, they probably can recognize this. For those who haven't, I don't want to kind of you know break down your parade here, you know. But it's almost the reality of things, and maybe you should. And I always tell people, you have a dream, go for it. You want a dream, you have a dream car, go for it. If you want to test something, go for it. Don't ever, stop yourselves from dreaming and or from achieving your dreams or working towards your dreams. And that's actually a true belief in for me. Like, please do so, folks. Yes, you want the Rolls Royce, go for it. You want the mention if you can. I mean, legally, of course, do whatever it takes to get there. But also psychologically speaking, this is me personally speaking. But I think Max here just shared the same concept or same. I think we're in the same wavelength here and frequency. Correct me. And Max, do expand on this concept because it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And you're 100% spot on. So, what we have to remember is that the human brain evolved over millions of years of evolution with only one goal in mind. And that goal is not our happiness. And it's not our success. It's not you driving a Rolls Royce. That goal is survival. To the brain, the most important thing is keeping you alive long enough to make a bunch of babies and bring them into the world. That's literally how we pass on our genes. And so it's called the evolutionary mismatch, right? We are designed for a world in which we no longer live. Back in the day, hundreds of thousands of years ago, our success was determined by very different activities than it is today. Whereas today, we have to, in order to achieve typical success, delay gratification. We have to work towards these long term goals. Back in the day, the most useful way to stay alive and therefore achieve evolutionary success was to, look for a bit of food, go hunting, go foraging, and then spend the rest of your day making love at home and enjoying your time, sitting down around the fire and not doing anything at all. Now, the way that nature or evolution ensured our survival and our action towards those goals was by making pleasurable things like making love or eating food, especially sugary food, incredibly pleasurable, right? Pain and pleasure are the two fundamental driving forces of the human psychology, just like for most other animals. And so it's not because the brain wants to make us happy or miserable. It's because those things, pain and pleasure, literally just drive our behavior. The moment I eat a sweet food, for example, or something sugary, right? My favorite cookies, what happens is I get this dopamine spike inside my brain. Dopamine being the molecule of desire, the neurochemical that gets you to act in the external world and pursue your goals. And so dopamine spikes, but dopamine doesn't stay up here because the moment I stop eating, dopamine will fade away again and it will drop not just to its previous baseline, but actually a little bit lower. And this is the kind of painful feeling, kind of desire and craving that oftentimes we feel after we finished, the first bag of cookies. You're like, I feel kind of bad. I want a second one. And so we jump on the second one. And again, we spike it, but now it folds down even further. Every time I spike my dopamine system, it actually goes more into the red, which means I actually experience this kind of pain. Most of our bad behaviors, addictions, or habits are really just designed to alleviate pain. I feel bad inside of me. I feel anxiety or stress or worries or anger. And so I use some external thing, alcohol, drugs, junk food, social media, movie marathons, something outside of human beings, right? To alleviate the pain inside. And what happens is over time, we just downregulate and mess up really that dopamine system so much that nothing normal, walking out in nature, spending time with friends, moving our body can bring us joy. Because all these supernatural stimuli, the Rolls Royce and the greatest and the best of everything, has so much dysregulated our nervous system and our dopamine baseline that now ordinary activities, those that used to throughout history fill us with incredible joy, now they feel kind of dull. And this is the reason I believe that we have such a vast amount of addiction nowadays in our society, is because everything that we have, from social media to the, our food industry to the news, is designed to hijack the dopamine system and ultimately leads us more and more towards anxiety and misery.
You know, it's amazing, right? You think that, as you said, you get this extra dopamine hit from your achievements and from your accolades, and all these things that are like supposed to be pleasurable, right? But they're not really pleasurable. I mean, the basic pleasures, to your point, is like we eat, we sleep, we have maybe an intimate relationship with our loved ones, and be with people that you love. I think that's the ultimate uh, achievement of life, because everything else I think is just added value, right? It's like, yeah, it's cool to have, but is it really, like we say this, I mean, in the sales world we say a want versus a need. Is it really a want or is it a need? And so I think that's the problem. We have to differentiate between those two levels, and I think most of us need basic, but then we want a lot more. And when you get to want more, I think, to your point, is really just it gets a nice high. It lasts for what it is. It's like, you're going on a speed, in a nice Lamborghini, and you're just going. I'm in the UAE, so Lamborghinis are kind of dime a dozen. So I would give, and you're actually in Ferrari land there. So we can talk about some nice cars here, right? And these are excellent cars. I mean, the beautiful cars, but really, are you gonna really hit 200 miles an hour in the street? Probably not. I mean, you could. You're just going to wind up in an accident or a lot of fines, right? Maybe would you take a nice Ferrari on a track and you're just an amateur driver? Maybe you hit a wall. That's not a cool thing. So at the end of the day, like, yes, we crave these things because we are bombarded, as you said. We see these things day in, day now more than ever. When I was a kid, all we had was maybe, so my American dream came from movies. And for me, being in with American kids, when I was a tiny kid, right? So I got the hookup there. Maybe like that's like, oh, I got impressed with their style, whatever, the dress code, the fun. I was a breakdancer, I was a skateboarder. So as a kid, so that was me. So I wanted to kind of continue live that. I was fulfilled at a point, but I discovered that no matter what you get, it just becomes cool. But the basics are the same. You can get very exciting, I guess, results with minimal. And by the way, I think that goes to the concept of being grateful, being what do you call it? I mean, there is another expression I want to throw in here. Just being content, really.
Yes.
With I mean, to be content, I think is a power, and we're not content. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's I think the problem that we have, and so we get, to your point, depressed, anxiety, because we constantly stressed out. Talking about dopamine, now you get all that negative stuff, that cortisol is kicking up,
Mhm.
a bunch, and then as you get the opposite, feeling. So that's that. And the other thing that I wanted to just throw in here is that I'm actually in maybe a few people that can say that maybe some people say, well, this is like, you're going too much in your hurricane, but life is like it is a simulation. It's a matrix. Especially, even from a religious perspective, right? We live in this world, we die, there's another life, right? So you kind of move from one to the other. That for those people that believe. If you don't believe, that's okay. If you believe in reincarnation, that's okay too. The bottom line is there's transitions. It's different realms, different dimension. We can go quantum physics here. We can go crazy, but it's a simulation. So you get a little like it's like I give sometimes these examples to my son. He's a gamer, so I always give the intent, like the idea, like think about the most complex game. It has different levels and different things. You don't know what's in level 20 until you've achieved level 20, right? And you still have to discover every game level and work towards it until you get there. I mean, it's like game like Tron, the movie, right? Atari business, and you got to get into this world that is digital. But the bottom line is, but let's talk religion. If we talk about creation, and the creator knows all that, but you and I, we don't know any of that. We just discover it as we go. Maybe we discover it, maybe we hear about it, but we're still confined into this limited, I guess, sphere or realm or dimension, right? And we sleep, we have different experiences. I mean, you dream, it's a whole different world. I mean, literally, it feels real. You have feelings, you have sensation, you have reactions. People bruise up, people bleed sometimes, waking up. They were in a fight. All this stuff is funny, to hear, but that's kind of like how we are. It's kind of the most amazing part of this world is that, how do we kind of understand all this? You're into a work, the work that you're in is psychology. It's brain, understanding. And psychology, I think, runs the world. I mean, you talked about, bombarded marketing is huge with psychology. It works psychology 101. I'm in sales, psychology 101. People buy because they get the excitement. Like, you want to get them so excited about a product that they want it. I want it so bad, right? But again, it's just hitting the same dopamine, levels, and that's it. Now let's go into your psychosomatic intelligence concept. Are we? Is this a related? What I'm talking about right now is actually what this intelligence is about. You get to the level where you can understand it, or can you define it for us?
Absolutely. So maybe before I go into that, I quickly want to piggyback off of what you just said, because we can also bring the neuroscience perspective to this. The brain, these 3 pounds of brain mass, are the most complicated, the most incredible system that we have in a known universe. And yet they never actually touch the light of day. They're kind of like an ancient pharaoh, buried inside the pyramid. And the only way in which we can interact with the world, in which we can feel joy and sorrow, is actually through the incoming sensations, right? Through our touch, our eyes, our ears, our mouth, right? Our taste, right? That's how we receive incoming information. Now, if you and I, we're consciously aware of all of the information coming in at the same time, the depths of our breath, our heart beating, the tingling in my right toenail, our conversation. If we're consciously aware of all of that information at the same time, our brain would, metaphorically at least, explode. And so what the brain has created is this kind of filtering mechanism. It's called the reticular activating system. It sits right at the base of our brain. And it acts kind of like a nightclub bouncer or the gatekeeper of your consciousness, right? It literally decides what enters consciousness and what doesn't, right? And now, how does it choose that? It chooses based on number one, your goals and priorities. If, for example, you're walking down the street and you really got to use the bathroom, all you can notice is bathroom stalls, right? If you're walking down that same street and now you're starving, all you can see is restaurants. You're walking down that same street and you're looking for love, now all you can see is beautiful faces left and right. Same exact experience, but your goals dictate what you notice into your conscious awareness. Same, you might have had this with the cars, right? It's a very common example. If once you buy that car, once you drive that car for the first place, or you think about that car because you really like it, you're going to start noticing it everywhere because now your brain literally filters it into existence. And so our goals are one thing, our beliefs, and that's really where we go now into psychosomatic intelligence, because it's really based a system based on 3 different interacting parts. Conscious mind, the part of you that sets goals and creates plans to achieve them. Now, most of us live from that state. We set a goal and then we try to use willpower to push through. But the problem is that willpower, 60 years of research show that willpower is a limited resource that depletes with use. You wake up in the morning, you're full of energy, and then every choice you make takes away a little bit. Should I eat the chocolate cookies or the healthy food? Should I cold shower or hot? Whatever it is. Until at the end of the day, we're left in a state where there's nothing more to give. And that's why, most bad behaviors and addictions happen at night. Most crime happens at night. Why? Because we've spent all day fighting ourselves and now we're too tired to do so anymore. And so willpower and self-control are really dressed up words for self-conflict. There's the conscious mind of me that wants to achieve something, but there's 2 other layers that directly fight against it. Now, that first layer of those is the subconscious mind, where our beliefs are housed around what do I deserve and what am I capable of and worthy of. So if I have a belief that says, because maybe at 6 years old I was told I'm stupid or I'm unlovable, I'm going to spend many, many years or decades, and for some people, their entire lives, walking through life, scanning every single conversation around signs that might say, "Hey, he thinks I'm stupid." You know, does he look? Does he give me a weird look? Did he judge me right now? And so I'm always living in my head, judging myself simply because I've created this filter when I was like 6 years old. And then the third part is really the state of our nervous system. How you feel right now, whether it's fight, flight, and freeze, or their smallest sibling states of anxiety, of guilt, of depression, of joy, of painfulness, whatever kind. All of these, what they do, these negative energy states, they literally shut down the prefrontal cortex, right here, the center of our brain, the part responsible for logical thinking, for planning, for motivation. And so it's kind of like you're put a blinders on these horses in a horse race, if you've ever seen that. Put these blinders on so the horse cannot see the other horses anymore or the visitor or spectators. It can only see the finish line. That's what we become when we're stuck in negative energy states. When we're angry, all we can think about is smashing that person. When we're fearful, all we can think about is running and hiding or sedating ourselves, drugging ourselves with our drug of choice. And so the key then really is optimizing the nervous system and creating a state of peace, of contentment, of abundance, of confidence, of love. Because from those states, you will show up very, very differently.
Well, so what makes so again, willpower, right? How do we activate it? I mean, it's like again, it's we use this term willpower, like we have freedom, the ability to make a decision. And again, between the conscious, subconscious, and our system interacting with each other, that's a whole thing. But it's decision making, right? It's happening, but it is happening with a lot of influence. So how does someone really kind of almost got it all out and fragmented to and compartment I can't even spell the word, put it in compartments here and just kind of like put them in sections and work slowly but surely to figure out how to operate, and ultimately remove the anxiety, the depression, all the bad stuff, the fear factor and all the things, and just kind of work in a magical way, if you want to call it that way, to a life of happiness. Which, by the way, I think if there is an ultimate target for all of us as humans, is would love to have happiness and achieve happiness. And I think, do we achieve happiness? That's the question. I think we touch on all these things that are worldly matters, if you want to call them that way, like things that we can possess, and we compete to get as many of those to kind of reach the happiness. But do we really achieve the happiness? So how do we, as humans, functionally really make it work? Because psychosomatic intelligence sounds like it's the game changer, but how does it all kind of correlate to you, me, and the average person? I mean, maybe some people are different. I mean, not everybody is built the same way. Obviously, socioeconomics are different, educational levels are different, cultures are different. All these can contribute to how we operate, but I think there is not a human on this planet that is not searching for that sweet spot, to really achieve the ultimate thing, right? And I believe, the ultimate success is really to be the happiest on this planet and content, to your point. But can we even get there? So what is the strategy? How do we get there?
You're absolutely right in so many ways. I mean, first of all, we have to recognize that there's genetically and part and biologically, there are different levels, right? And so you might generally be able to play at a higher level than someone else. Now, this is what researchers call the happiness baseline. It tends to be a relatively stable baseline around which our happiness revolves. And so, an example I like to use here, if you try to climb Mount Everest, there's all these different camps along the way that you will stay for a few days to acclimatize to the low oxygen in the air. And so you're gonna, arrive at the airport at 3,000 meters height, 9,000 feet for our American listeners. And so you climb up to the base camp at 5,000 meters. And what you do from there, you usually stay for a few days, a few weeks. And, some days you might go up to acclimatize even more. And other days you go down to, pack up some gear and some more food. But every night you return back to your comfortable base camp baseline, essentially. Now, what you do is when you move to base camp one, you move the entire baseline up. You still go up and down, but now everything that you do is higher than what you did before. That's exactly what's happening with our happiness. What we try to do is we try to create these temporary spikes by doing or achieving or processing or consuming more stuff. But inevitably, we will come back down. And so our goal instead is to move and upregulate the entire baseline. And we've got to understand that, every spiritual, every philosophy throughout the course of history has told us that the only way to do that is to look inwards, to look at one, our mind and the thoughts that are running through my mind, and two, towards my body, because we cannot disconnect the two. Mind and body are two sides of the same coin, because our nervous system and the neurochemistry inside influences how we think, and in return, how we think influences our neurochemistry. And so the way I like to explain this is, imagine going on the best date of your life. You've met the partner of your dreams, the most beautiful, fun, loving, interesting person you've ever met. And after the greatest date of your life, that man or woman of your dreams, they finally lean over and they run their fingers through your hair, and their honey sweet lips touch yours. In a moment that should be pure ecstasy. And yet all you can think about is, oh my God, my breath? Maybe it stinks a lot. Oh my God, does he really like me? Oh my God, does she really want a relationship? And so you ruin this perfect moment by living in your head. That's the tyranny of overthinking, scheming, planning, strategizing all the time to create a better life in the future, forgetting that true aliveness and vibrancy can only be found in the here and now. Seeking
The moment.
is misery. To seek happiness in the future automatically creates misery, because what it says is, I'm not happy right now. And in order to be happy, I need something else out there, which means I'm not good enough right now. But being is ecstasy. That's the contentment that we're looking for. The ability to be right here, right now, and just be okay with what is. And in terms of neurochemistry, it's driven by completely different systems. Dopamine is the molecule of more. It's future focused. It's the thing that inspires the American dream. It's the thing that gets us to achieve goal after goal after goal. But the problem is that the moment we achieve it, it fades away again. The purpose of dopamine is to motivate us into action. It's not to enjoy it. That's where other neurotransmitters, such as serotonin, comes in. Serotonin is the contentment molecule. It's your ability to be present, to sit there at dinner with your friends and have a great time, not worrying about what's coming next tomorrow. And so, what we want to learn, really, we want to learn to activate the right neurochemicals so that we're not just chasing all the time, but we also find contentment and a peace in the here and now.
Like, so I'm listening to you, and we, you and I we had the name discussion earlier, right? But German, how do you pronounce it in English versus German? Well, Albert Einstein, and throwing it in the German way. Albert Einstein, for those American folks, you know, um, talks about relativity of time, right? And so time is linear, can go back in time. Maybe we can travel to the future if we can exceed the speed of light and all the stuff. We can talk about all that science there. But really, time is relative, right? You're having a great moment. It seems that it goes fast. You're having a bad moment, a bad day. It seems long, right? Uh, you know, Past, present, and future are all existent at the same time if you think about it this way, right? We can get deeper in the concept of quantum physics and all the nice. However, the only true moment is really this moment. And so this moment is the truth. And then a second later, it becomes back, So we just talked, and then now again, the new moment, new presence, like almost a repetitive, time span that actually happens. The problem that we have is that, we create anxiety because we anticipate things that we have no control over because we don't know what's going on tomorrow. Yeah, we can plan, prior planning prevents poor performance, fail to plan to fail. We can use these I guess strategies to operate in the world. But do I have to stress out every time, about what's going to happen tomorrow? There is no guarantee tomorrow is going to happen, at least not for me. I mean, tomorrow may happen, but is it guaranteed for me as a person? Nobody can tell you that. Nobody can guarantee a second later, right? And then, or we live in the past, things that happened. I should have, could have, I didn't do this. Why? Oh my God, I made the wrong person. I did. That's the problem we have. So we live in these almost antagonistic, time zones, you know, in our brains. And to your point, there's a conflict. Like, we're just like, almost lost in space or in cyberspace, or maybe in this case in mental space, or subconscious world, somewhere we're just kind of, floating around there, like, like what the hell's going on? It's a past, fighting the future, the present, and it's all a mush. And we got a problem because we can't control everything. That's, I think, the problem. And when I'm listening to you, really as simple as just enjoy the moment. I mean, I think if we can just do that, we can change the way we live this life, and nothing will phase us out. And again, we can use the keywords patience and, having, a cool tone. I mean, people get, this is true. I mean, I hear this all the time. If you took one moment, one minute actually to think, a few seconds to think before you say a word, you can avoid catastrophe any given day. I mean, people get into fights, get into divorce, get into accidents because of one, they just overreact quicker than thinking. They should think, then act. We act before we think. That's a problem. I think by the way, I'm just as guilty as charged here. I mean, I'm human. I'm not superpower here, you know, or alien. I'm just as human as everybody else. But I do experience these things. Now I try to adapt to these things that I'm learning. I mean, over the course of 7 years, I've had a lot of shows, and before that, I've always were seeking, information to help me. And it's funny because you said something about the brain really doesn't see the light. It's really engulfed in this. And frankly, when we start talking about energy and quantum physics, I mean, really everything that we experience is through our senses, to your point, as you said. And so we do have control, folks. I mean, and you can enjoy it. I mean, you see meditation, they close their eyes and they can listen, they can hear things better. We hear things about, hearing impaired or visual, visual impaired, folks who actually have capabilities that are beyond, in terms of understanding and hearing, feeling, and sensing. So we do have powers. We hear the sixth sense sometimes. Nobody can really. I mean, I'm sure you probably can, but many of us don't understand what that is. We call intuition. There's other things to it, but it's real. All these things are happening, but it's all converging to one reality, which is now and the moment, which what you just said. So am I getting this right as far as putting all the time stuff together? Because I'm listening to you. It's just fire.
Absolutely.
It's kicking all these synapses right now.
Thinking all the synapses, that's what we're all about, right? And really what this reminds me of is, most of this, I love this idea of mental time travel, right? Because that's literally what we do. Research shows that about half the time, half of our waking day, we're not actually living here, but we're thinking about what Fred from accounting said to us. We're thinking about, what's going to happen in 3 years from now if we achieve this or if this goes wrong or whatever it is. But all of that is really just an escape from the present moment, an escape from our body. And why do we do that? So many times in our lives when we suffer pain or trauma or disappointment, it actually gets stuck in the body, right? And so I carry this heaviness, this tension in my shoulders, or my neck, or my jaw, or this shallow breath, right? And I feel this constant tension and unworthiness maybe inside of me. And so what many addicts do, in the same way that many high achievers do, is they disconnect from that. They do it in different ways, right? The addict by looking for the drug of choice, whatever that is, and the high achiever by moving into the mind and disconnecting from the body. And this is kind of Pyrrhic victory because on the plus side, yeah, you don't feel the pain anymore. You get to disconnect from the suffering and the weird sensation in your stomach. But the danger, of course, is you also miss out on all the goodness that life has to offer. The butterflies in your stomach, the beautiful warm sunshine on your face. You cannot feel truly alive if you miss out on those sensations because happiness ultimately, it's sensations in our body. It's not just a mental experience that says, great ice cream, I'm so happy right now. No, it's like, oh my God, my mouth is exploding right now. Right? That's what happiness is. It's the tingling on our fingertips. And to go back to this idea of the sixth sense or this intuition, the great psychologist Carl Jung said that intuition is really perception via the unconscious. What does that really mean? Our body has this incredible wisdom. And if we look at the vagus nerve, the largest nerve running, between brain and body, it's actually sending 80% of its information, not from the brain to the body, but from the body to the brain. And so the body is constantly communicating. The subconscious also is constantly communicating, but we're usually not listening. And so we miss out on a wealth of information because we're too stuck in the head and we don't notice the tension in my chest or the weird feeling in my fingers that might give me clues around, this person really feels right to me, or something feels really off here, or, I'm feeling really weird because I'm having this negative thought. And so our job then is to get back into the body because, coming back to what you said, the body is a great vehicle to become present again, to enter the one reality that we have. Because sensation cannot live in the past. A thought about a sensation can live in the past. A thought about, I had pain yesterday, but that's a thought again. But a physical sensation of joy, of bliss, of pain can only happen in the here and now. And so the moment I recognize that, I turn back into my breath, I relax my body, I notice the tension in my jaw and I actively let it go. It's one of the easiest ways that I've found to become present again.
It's funny. The you've probably seen the movie Lucy.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's that I'm talking about the mind power, right? And you get to a point where if and by the way, I think it's a fact we don't even explore more than a couple of percent of our real brain, power, where maybe like 2-3%. I think that's what the average person is. We get a 10%, forget about it. We're geniuses, and you hit beyond that in that movie, and it's still a movie, but it's got a concept of real stuff that the more you tap into it, the more you're conscious about every single thing. The time becomes irrelevant. Your actual the senses, you can hear everything, you can sense everything, you can hear your own, internal organs. And people actually, I've heard these things with people who do meditations and things like that. They can get into some of the levels beyond the average person in what they hear. It's like it's almost they can cleanse the noise from everything that's happening and just tune in. I mean, they're, think about you get a nice little ham radio, right? And you can tweak it till you get a nice crisp, connection in the frequency so you can hear other people, talking around. It's very difficult just for the normal folks driving the car. If you tune into a nice radio and there's no more, what do you call it, static, and you hear the real crisp, feed, that's the thing, right? But we just not there because to your point we get too busy. But now here's the thing, so we're self-sabotaging in a way, and then there's the other concept that we refer to as mindset. Now how does really mindset play in this equation? Because the nervous system is operating, it's in control, right? It controls the performance, and if you want to call it that way, but really the mindset is like the choice we make. So how do we kind of, for our audiences, I think if we can start practicing these, the trick here, and tuning out, bad things and tuning in good things, and choosing the better choices and not thinking about, the worst and the good. And I mean, yeah, you can think about good memories to your point. We live in the past, and you lost someone that you love, you have good memories with them, you remember them. You had a bad experience, you know, you possibly think about it? Yes. And it's gonna create anxiety, like maybe like depression. Or you can just say, you know what, I ignore that, just focus on what happened and positive. I think that's the thing. We hear the expression. I mean, look, half full or half empty. That's a choice, right? So this is literally the mindset we're talking about here. It's just how we do it. So we can live in the past. And by the way, I've heard this many times where they say if you live in the past, that's depression. If you live in the future, that's anxiety. We don't want neither. We want to be now having a good time. But in your, you know, expertise, how do we kind of do exactly what I'm saying here? Like, just to tune in and look at the positive, apply the right mindset, strategy, and not self-sabotage.
Let's look at what's actually happening inside the brain as we become present. We tend to think that, and it's just common myth that we are operating at 10% of our brain power, or that only 10% of our brain are active at any given time. It's actually not quite that, right? In fact, in our most anxious, angry moments, all of our brain tends to be activated. It's just activated in the wrong way, meaning the wrong parts of the brain, namely the default mode network, what Buddhists call the monkey mind, the overactive part that's constantly running a camera commentary on your life. That part is actually overactive. And as we calm down, as we become still, that part actually turns off. And so to be peaceful, to be performing at your best actually means that the brain is slowing down its activation and the conscious mind turns off so that the subconscious skills that you've developed can take over. Now, what does that really mean? Well, think back to the first time you were driving a car. You have to consciously think about the steering wheel and the gas and the gears and the stop and the mirrors, and you have to look left and right and not kill any people along the way, right? It's so difficult and scary and anxiety provoking because you have to do it all consciously. Now, over time, what happens is any skill, whether it's learning a language or learning a mental skill or learning how to drive a car, gets pushed from the conscious mind into the subconscious mind. The way the brain does that, it creates new neural connections inside your brain and it strengthens them with use. And so the second time you get in a car, it's a little easier. The 10th time you get in a car, it's a little easier. Well, today, if this morning you drove to work, you were singing along to Katy Perry songs, not minding anything at all because the subconscious has now taken over the skill of driving and looking left and right and braking and using the gas and everything in that complicated process so that your conscious mind basically has freed up its resources again. And the trouble oftentimes is that we are experts in our field, right? You might be an expert football player or mathematician, and the way we screw it up is actually by overthinking, by overacting the brain so the conscious mind starts to think again. And now what happens? I'm thinking hard and I'm thinking about, oh, 3 degrees to the left and 5 degrees to the right. The moment you start overthinking, right? That's when you mess things up. And so, really, what we're going to learn is to get out of our own way. And the way we do that is by there's different methods and strategies, right? One again is coming back to the body. The breath is usually the easiest thing because it's always available to us. And it's actually the fastest way to regulate our nervous system. And so what happens when you're anxious or stressed out, you tend to breathe really shallowly into the chest. So when you can slow that down, breathe deeply into the belly, prolong every exhale, you're going to notice yourself immediately entering into calmer state of mind. And so the breath is a phenomenal tool. Any kind of movement, whether it's dancing or jumping or shaking or just taking a walk in nature, is a great tool to return back to the body. And what we want to remember then is, like most of our anxiety comes because we value ourselves and our self-love based on these external results. So the reason I go into the exam and I'm so anxious is because I think, if I mess this up, I'm going to feel bad about myself. My life would somehow suffer because of that. And it's actually that exact anxiety that is more likely to cause my failure. And so what we're going to learn is we want to focus on the process and learn to enjoy that rather than just think about the end result. Because the more I attach to that, the more I'm going to suffer in the moment and actually make myself miserable and quite literally dumber. Because research shows that when we're constantly engaged in this rumination, we quite literally become dumber because the prefrontal cortex, again, it shuts down, which means I cannot think logically anymore.
That's what happens when we're angry. That's what happens when we overthink. And by the way,
Yes.
it's. I'll give you a good example. And so I've been in sales all my life. I was a tour guide when I first, started my career. So you're always in front of people, and fright. What I call is like stage fright is a big deal, right? Standing in front of public and speaking, in public is usually a very difficult task for most of us, right? Most of us will probably try to avoid as much as we can being on the back of the room. I mean, being would rather be behind the scenes than being in front, right? And but this is something I've always had. Like I practice it over the years. I don't think about things. Like literally, like this happened to me many times where someone start talking about something that I'm about to present. I screw up that whole presentation because I'm constantly thinking about it, before. But when I shut down everything, I know I'm gonna go present. I go up there and do it. And by the way, even in the shows, even when I do this, if I start thinking about a show before and too much, like especially before that, like that's what they say sometimes. You have a test tomorrow, you don't study the night, the night, before the test. That's it. You do your thing, you prepare, you just relax, do something, let your brain, and then there's other ways. I think they say you use a gum, while you study, and it can bring the memories back. Now you can tell is that a myth or not, but at the end, there's techniques and tactics that you can use. But if you keep thinking over and over and over, to your point, before we do an activity, it becomes completely overwhelming, and then we sweat, we get anxiety, and we can't focus. And I think that's the thing. You can't focus, you can't think, and you make mistakes. As a matter of fact, the more you think about something, the more you're gonna probably say something wrong, or claim something wrong, or miss it up, literally, and then you're like, what the hell just happened? And you're right. Like here's a rule with me. Like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? This is what I use. It's not going to be nice. Okay, no big deal. I'm going to restart again. So there is a way out, and as long as you think that that you're going to have no problem, and you're confident in the outcomes one way or the other, you don't have a problem. The problem, we always, like, again, high achieving stuff. Like, we want to do things. I mean, it's okay. We hear this in business. A lot of pressure, right? I mean, I come from corporate world. There's a lot of pressure. You want to achieve. You want to. But what happens if you don't? Like, so I'm in sales. In sales, it's you're only as good as your numbers today. Tomorrow's a new day, right? You start again. So you start fresh. Now, but are you entitled to have a bad day? Some people can say, "Oh, no, you can't have that. I mean, you're a leader. You gotta." No, you can have a bad day. You can have a bad month. Sometimes you can have a bad quarter. It can happen, folks. And so, in the business world, we tend not to believe in those things, or we don't want them because it's all profit based, right? But we are still humans. We're not machines. You can expect 100% results from a robot. Maybe with AI now, we don't have that problem. And even AI says it makes some mistakes. So always check your information carefully when you use AI, right? So if AI is not perfect, the robots cannot be as perfect. What do you expect for humans to be 100% perfect? And by the way, that's our problem. Some people say I'm a perfectionist. There's no such thing as perfection, right? You can't be perfect. We all have flaws. We all are not 100%. I don't care if you have a PhD or two PhDs. You're good at what, like you said, you're the best at what you do, but you're not the best at everything else. Yeah. I mean, so you can use some of the techniques, the knowledge you have. It's all good. I mean, I'm not an expert, in a lot of areas, but I talk about a lot of things, right? But I'm not the one. I get the experts. I'll have the experts explain to me things, and I just interact with the experts and I learn from them. Or I do my research and I learn and get prepared. But the idea is, I do not think about what would go wrong. I would always, like, even like when at work, in the corporate space, I tell people in my team is this: there is a problem. Okay, so let's not talk about the problem. Let's talk about what we can do now to solve this and go to the next step, and to next stage, and then we can figure out how to avoid from that problem happening. That's the same thing with failure. Oh my God, I'm going to fail. We fear failure and we think it's the end of the world. Failure is just another way to learn, another way, you learn how not to do it or how to do it better. That's all. So, but if we start thinking again, in this concept that I'm using, this, by the way, I'm sharing my personal stuff. Like, I'm not sure if it works for everybody, but it works for me. I do use, the box breathing, which I learned from Dr. Heim. Shout out to Dr. Heim from here. Box breathing works. You exhale, like you exhale, you stop. You inhale, you stop, and you just take your time, breathe. You can have an anxiety attack, and literally, and I've actually used this with people. I've used something with people that had anxiety to get into elevators. I just told them, close your eyes, get in the elevator, and think that you're actually at a beach. And actually, it worked.
Yes.
Literally, they actually said, "Okay, we'll trust you." We got into the elevator. They're
Mhm.
thinking about themselves in the beach. They're not thinking about the elevator, and they were able to actually get into the elevator. Done. Trauma is gone. Now, someone says like, "Oh, that's too much hype," guys, on this show. It is what it is. First of all, I'm my expert here is a psychologist. He knows how we function brain wise. It makes a different story, for someone like me versus him, right? So in that same concept, Max, uh, emotional regulation, decision making, and by the way, psychosomatic coherence, is something that you refer to. I was doing some review about stuff. What is all that to do with how we function? The things I'm talking about right now.
You're absolutely spot on. So psychosomatic coherence, imagine it kind of like an orchestra with 100 different players, all playing in sync to create this beautiful symphony. The drums, the violinists, the singers, all of them are working in harmony. And that's what happens. And that's what it feels like inside our body when both the brain and our nervous system are aligned and they're moving towards the same goals, being present, being engaged in here now. Now, what happens when things break, and that's what's called psychosomatic dissonance. That's kind of like all the different instruments inside that orchestra playing their own rhythm, right? So the drums are a little too loud, the violins are a little too fast, and it just creates a shrieking noise. And I can see on your face, right? Just that image inside your mind, right? It's like, it hurts. Yet that's the experience of most of us for most of our lives. There's this constant inner tension, a battle inside of me. There's me wanting to do something, and then another part that always says, no, you don't deserve this. You can't do this. I'm too tired. I don't really feel like it. And so, what psychosomatic coherence is really about is learning to feel great in the present moment by mentally becoming fully present and engaged and physically optimizing their nervous system and the neurochemistry inside because we have such tremendous influence over that. And most of us, we aren't aware of the fact that, we tend to usually hijack our dopamine system in negative ways, but we also can do that in positive ways. Cold water exposure, for example, has been shown to have an incredible 250% increase in dopamine over the next few hours, and that in a healthy way. So, unlike with junk food or social media consumption or, drugs or alcohol, where you get this negative spike or this negative drop afterwards, cold water exposure or exercise also in the same way, they create this long-term dopamine increase that actually makes you feel really good. And so you take that cold shower in the morning, and for the next few hours, you're going to feel this energy and drive and motivation inside. That's an easy way to create more psychosomatic coherence and feel good in the present moment. And so, what we want to do is really want to just bring more awareness to our current patterns, to recognize all the ways in which we're currently sabotaging ourselves and our happiness. The thoughts that are running through my mind, because all of anxiety is ultimately playing God. It's me thinking I can control reality. And at the moment it goes differently from what I want, I'm going to suffer. But what that really means is that every attachment is a contract to suffer. It says, I'm not going to be happy. In fact, I refuse to be happy until the world bends itself to my will. Now, unless you're God, that is not going to work over the long run. And so, what we have to learn is to bring it all back again into the present moment. And I think that's really the key. And then, what we can do really is we can look at the physical patterns as well. How do I breathe? What kind of tension do I hold in my shoulders or my neck or my jaw or my belly? How expressive am I with my body? There's some great research on the impact of power posing, for example, making ourselves large and big, as well as using a smile, a simple smile on your face. And the way researchers found this out is they put, basically a pencil inside of people's mouth. So they had to kind of hold it sideways. And what happens is people actually report being happier. Why? Because their face suddenly makes a smiling, sends a smiling sensation to the brain and it acts as a feedback mechanism that says, wow, if I'm smiling, I must be really happy. One really interesting part of the research shows that when people inject themselves with Botox in their face, they oftentimes become happier. Not because of the Botox itself, but because the Botox kind of forces this artificial smile. And when you cannot frown anymore, it's really hard to feel miserable or angry, right? Now, I'm not suggesting to anyone to get Botox to feel happier. What I am suggesting is like fix your face, you know? Move up, bring
Wait,
out a little smile and bring your body, make it large and big, right? Open your chest, breathing deeply into your belly, shoulders back. And what you're going to notice, a drastic difference in how you feel inside.
Max, I'm laughing because it does take, I think, less muscles just to have a nice smile than actually frown. I think we use a lot more, energy to frown than actually to be happy and smile. And by the way, I did read about the whole experiment with the pencil. And you're right. Like you have a fake smile, but your brain is doesn't know the difference. I mean, that's the other thing. Like the brain sometimes doesn't know what's real, what's imaginary, what's in your subconscious stuff. I mean, sometimes it just becomes one, and so the reality things. There's one thing that happens a lot is that we talk negative, about things, and it becomes a negative response. The other thing you mentioned is we're so caught in everything that we have zero control over. I think that's a big problem that we all have as humans. Like we're worried about everything that you have zero control over. Like very simple, guys. When you go, for those of you who have been on a flight, well, you have no control over the flight. The captain is locked into the cockpit, and they have an operating tower somewhere that's guiding them. They got their own gizmos and stuff that's happening in that front, system, and that's all there is. You have no control over it. They turn, they go up, they go down. They have turbulence. They know it's coming. You don't. You just feel it. It happens in when you drive. When you're a passenger in the car. You know, the driver is in control. They know where they see the bump. They know where they can move left, right. But if you're not paying attention, you're like, oh my God, you're moving left, you're moving right. You're getting scared. But here's the thing: you either are in the helm and the leading, or you just gotta relax. You don't have you. Okay, I'm gonna trust this. They're gonna do their job. That's it. Look, I mean, good example. I'm in the UAE. I mean, we're still, we're in a, I guess, ceasefire time frame right now. But we've been here, since the beginning of this war. And I can tell you this, there are two options we had. One is to, oh my God, panic. The world is ending. We got to do something about it. And some people did that, and they left the country. They ran. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with them. People have, a choice. Or you can just, okay, I trust these folks, that they have better, than just me. They have a whole, world that they have to cover. They have a reputation. They have a country. They have humans. They have population and they can do the job, right? So we just have to trust, that they're going to do a good job about it, and they did. And so for me to worry about, like, every minute that the world is ending in my head, and that's just gonna drive me crazy. But literally, and that's what happened. Most of us, we're hanging out, we're going out about our business, we're meeting people, we're at coffee shops, we're at the mall, we're at the movies, we're, at people's houses. It literally went exactly that way, and nothing. I mean, we hear in the news we had something. Sometimes you hear something going on, and they're taking care of business. So you trust the process, and besides, you have no control. This is the whole thing. Do you have control or not? The only control is what you. Yeah, could I have removed myself out? I could, but that in itself is a whole dilemma, because that's going to create too much stress, anxiety, depression, the whole nine. Oh my God, the world is ending. Why? And by the way, it can happen at home, it can happen at work. Again, concept in the business. You have a situation. Do I have to? We like, who the hell is responsible? What happened? What we some people, they start with the whole, like, who's in charge, who's the scapegoat, who's this, or let's say, okay, what happened? Problems do happen, folks. I can tell you this from a corporate leader: there is no such thing as a perfect process and operation. I mean, you process improve as you go. Things happen all the time. A crisis like this, for example, people don't cannot foresee it happening, in advance. It happens, you deal with it. We had COVID. Everybody had to adjust to COVID. Guess what? The world did function during COVID. We had to adjust quickly, and we did. Companies thrive, during sometimes these tragic moments, right? It's because people adapt, and they shift, they change, and they don't panic. They use what they can control, and those that don't, they suffer. And that's, I think, the problem. And by the way, we all can use what Max is talking about today, is that we can tweak out things and really just tone in the moment, the present. Now, so one question: uh, people still struggle, with self doubt. Why? Especially that if they really, like, for example, if they listen to this, right? You've given all the elements that can shift someone from having a bad day to a good day. and they're basic elements. I mean, you broke it down to the science. You tell us, what some of the tips you just talked about, from a cold shower to just, smile, and a few minor adaptations to change. But people still self-doubt. They still are not sure. They're anxious about things. What else can we do to help them, just to send them a good message to today? You listening, watching right now, today, you're going to change for the better. What can we do? What can we tell them?
One important thing to remember is that our brain cannot tell the difference between reality, like the thing we see in front of us, and our vivid imagination. So if you think back to the last horror movie that you watched, why do you get scared, right? Why do you scream? Why do you panic? Why does the heart beat faster when the guy's coming with the axe? It's because your brain actually thinks it's real, right? It cannot tell the difference. And so the beauty of meditation, visualization, and all of these practices is that as you close your eyes, you disconnect from outer reality. And now the only truth is the truth that you create within. And that's a story that you tell yourself. And so as you close your eyes, you can tell yourself a story that things are going to go wrong, that bad things are going to happen, that you have no power in your life, that you're just miserable and you have no way of changing it. Or you can tell yourself an empowering story. And part of that is a fundamental understanding that the brain cannot process the word no. So for our listeners, and you can also play this little game with me right now if you want. If you
Go
close
for
your
it.
eyes for a moment, for if you're not operating any cars or anything, for our listeners, now do not, and I repeat, do not imagine a golden crocodile coming out of the ocean. And I can see you laughing right there. Already, buzzer fail.
I saw the yeah,
It
I
happens.
didn't even, I did that. This is like a do not go past go, whatever. I mean, I didn't even finish the whole this. You didn't finish. I was already there.
Game over,
Oh
right?
man. Game over,
And so,
man. That
yeah,
was fun.
that's what we do in our lives, right? We say, I don't want to feel stressed anymore. I don't want to fail. I don't want to embarrass myself in the speech. I don't want to say something stupid. And yet, all the brain activates is the neural networks associated with misery or failure or embarrassment. And so that's why, again, coming back to what you shared before with the overthinking, when you overthink, you actually tend to say that stupid stuff. Well, it's because you've actually primed that inside your brain. And so it's more readily available. And so if you keep thinking about do not say that stupid thing, you're probably going to say that stupid thing. Now let's try a second game. If you close your eyes again, and now this time, please do imagine a pink, fluffy unicorn. It's so cozy and nice, and it lands right, next to where you are. You jump on and you feel this fluffiness, and it takes you up into the sky, and then you're making circles around your house, and then your city and the world. And now you're still thinking about a golden crocodile? Completely vanished, right?
That's well, it's amazing, right? I'm telling that what I mentioned earlier about the elevator, that was actually a real thing. A friend of mine
Yes.
had a problem, and I just said, there is no elevator. Just kind of remove yourself from the idea. If you close your, actually, when you close your eyes, the world is yours. That's what hypnosis. I mean, I've done hypnosis many times, and you close your eyes, and basically you start imagining whatever what you just said now. I mean, if you went for another few minutes, I'll probably be completely under full hypnosis. But that's really what it is. Like you can, about self hypnosis is a real thing. And you talked something about the driving, right? It becomes second nature, but also we get hypnotized on the concept. I mean, how many times I drove, to work without even thinking that I just get in, I'm on the phone, I'm there already. Or sometimes you go into a different location and you wind up at the wrong location. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Because you're so used to going one way, that your mind, and you were distracted, you didn't realize that you actually veered out from the actual destination. You wound up at the standard destination. That's because our brain, to your point, is already like conditioned to these things. And when you meditate, you close your eyes, and by the way, I use these things again. I mean, I'm not sharing this because I'm on the show. I actually practice what I preach and what I learn in these shows with the experts. I'm the first client, and it helps me. It serves me well to operate, in the business world, in my own personal stuff. And it gives me like less, listen, I've gone through a lot of stuff in the last couple of years, a lot of changes in my life, right? from movement, loss of family members, all kind of stuff, right? And you know what? Doesn't phase me. I'm still gonna continue because I'm focused. I have this stuff, but that's how I operate. We're just trying to hopefully make a difference. And guests such as Max, they have the expertise to guide us. I mean, this little exercise that Max you just did, I think if someone just get lost in their daily life, they can just kind of close and speed up to a Caribbean island or maybe to their favorite destination in the world and just kind of spend a couple of moments there and come back. I mean, you can't live in your mind
Yes.
literally if you wanted to. I mean, you're in control of that, and again, things you cannot control. I mean, you can't control weather. So can you prepare for weather? Yes, but you can't control it. You can't control, disasters. It's they're happening. What are you going to do? I mean, again, we're the example of the wars is a big example. There's only so much I can do. There's nothing. Am I prepared to bail if I have to? Yeah, but how far can you go? If there is no transportation, what are you gonna do? If and even if you did, I mean, would you have access to your funding? Would you have access to this, to the other stuff? If you start thinking about everything that you have very little control over, you're just not gonna be happy, and therefore you're gonna be stressed. Listen, uh, we had a recent shows about suicide. That's a big deal, and people sometimes they get too overwhelmed in life, and that becomes an out, for them. And but as sad as it sounds, I mean, they got to that conclusion, but could they have possibly been, you know, saved? Or maybe those of us that are out there that are today alive and going through tough time, we can start thinking in this realm, with Max's concepts, and we can change. Maybe we can prevent them. Maybe we know someone who's going through tough time. Maybe we can help them and guide them through some of the discussion here and send some of these pointers to them. They can actually maybe shift their mind to a better life and enjoy life. Life is worth enjoying, folks. You know, if you're healthy, you can get up in the morning, you can still walk, and you can see, and we are so fortunate for the most of us, every day that we live, we have a lot of things, and some of us may not have equal things, but see what you have to be grateful for. Max, am I getting this right? I mean, I think it's not
Absolutely, yeah.
very difficult. Tell us
No,
more a
and,
little
and
bit.
you
I know
know,
we exceeded the time, but
one
this topic is powerful.
no, one thing I would love to add to that is like you're not alone. We're all playing the same game. In fact, 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, he was at the time the most powerful human being alive. And every single night he would write in his own journal, writing to himself to remind himself of exactly these principles. So one night he wrote that there is no more powerful and peaceful retreat than your own mind. He wrote to himself, you can retreat to the country, to the mountains, to the coastline. You can go to all these beautiful places, but there is no more peaceful retreat than your own mind. Because inside your mind, you have the power to time travel, to place travel. You have the power to zoom yourself to your favorite place in the world, seeing your favorite people in the world. Because your brain cannot tell the difference between reality and imagination, you can place yourself into a moment in which you felt absolute love. And you can bask in that love again, breathing it in and feeling in every fiber of your being. You can step into a moment of success and feel again that confidence or abundance or joy. And so, deliberate mental time travel can actually give us these states of being when we deliberately go back, we enjoy a moment of gratitude or peace or success or love. And so when we make the unconscious conscious, we can start taking control of our lives. And always remember that you're not alone. Every single person you meet is fighting exactly the same battles. And if sometimes it looks like people have their lives together, it's only because you don't know what's going on in someone else's head.
Thank you, Max. And the fact of the matter is, with social media today, we have a lot of happy faces, happy times, that we see. And sometimes I think we all are, you know, driven to that world that's the reality of things. But to your point, that's not the truth. I mean, no one is sitting here having a tough time and recording themselves having a bad day. Everybody is, recording themselves when they have a good time. whether they're influencing or on purpose or whatever. And even sometimes when they do stuff, sometimes it's action, right? It's you're a performer, on social media. But the reality of things, people have this facade that only inside of them they know what's going on, and most of us have our own problems. There is no, you can be the happiest person in the face of people, but you can have financial issues, you can have health issues, you can have marital problems, you can have kids issues, you can have partner business issues. I mean, there's all kind of stuff. It doesn't matter who you are. Life is not peachy 100%. I mean, it's a test. I mean, if you think about it, we talk about the matrix and stuff, it is a test, run. It's a simulation, if you want to call it that way, but whatever it is, it's meant to teach us lessons. There's things, and we have to do our bids. We have to operate within. There's some rules that we have to work with. But how do we navigate? That's the question. I mean, it's like I always give the example. I mean, in the rivers, right? The rivers, they find a lot of obstacles in their way, but they just find a way out. I mean, water doesn't stop. I mean, it's just gonna find a way in the ground, out of ground, around the ground, whatever. It's gonna find itself, moving somewhere. That's the whole thing, right? We are supposed to be flexible. I think when we get rigid within ourselves, we destroy ourselves, and that's the worst part. And I think that's the thing. I think your work, Max, can make a difference. So now let's talk about that. How can people work with you, Max, to in person? And what else do you have to as tools that you can give them that they can connect with, that they can literally apply in real life? Yeah, I mean, obviously the show is a show. This is just a little time. I mean, you're an expert in the matter, so people reach out to you and work with you. So let's talk about your program. How does it work, and what else can they have from you?
Absolutely. So the way I really work is I usually work with high achievers that feel stuck. If you've listened to the show, you've heard all of these, you know, challenges that you might have felt connected with. It might be a constant self-sabotage, the constant, I'm trying to reach for more, I'm trying to create more health, more love, more success in my life, but somehow I keep holding myself back, right? That handbrake in a Lamborghini or that it's always switched on, right? Or I feel like no matter how much I achieve, it's never quite enough. And that success cannot fill the hole inside my chest. And so that's really whom I work with. And I help them create this happiness from the inside that then translates into success on the outside. Back since 2003, for the last 23 years in psychology, we've known that the relationship between happiness and success is backwards to what we believe it is. In our culture, we think that success is going to lead to happiness. But what the research very clearly shows is happiness is actually the cause of success. And as I cultivate love, peace, contentment, and abundance inside, the outside world becomes a lot easier because your state of being dictates how boldly, how courageously, how abundantly you can show up in your love, in your business, in your health, with your friends, in everything that matters. And so that's really what I do is I help people, one-on-one really all over the world to optimize their brains, optimize their nervous systems so they can finally get out of their own way. Now, there's a lot of people to get ways to get in touch. Easiest is via my website, maxweigand.com. You'll find a free PSQ test actually that measures these different neural muscles, measures your level of awareness, of equanimity, of positivity, so that you know exactly what to practice next.
Well, I love that PSQ. Like, it's like IQ for psychology. Is that what that stands for, right?
Yes.
So psychosomatic, I guess quotient. Is that what it stands for?
Yes, exactly. So and I think the reason it's important because we've always been obsessed with the X factor that shapes our life, right? And back in the 1890s, the first thing, or then beginning of the 19th century, the first thing we became obsessed with was this idea of intelligence, the intelligence quotient, right? And so we measured this kind of rational cognitive intelligence, but pretty quickly realized that your ability to solve math problems does not necessarily translate to a meaningful, fulfilling life. And so that's when, back in the 80s, 90s, we've developed the system of EQ, emotional intelligence, and our ability to relate to others. But you can be cognitively smart, you can be emotionally intelligent, and yet still not manage to govern and control yourself. And that's what PSQ is really about. Mastering yourself so that the outer world becomes a lot easier and more enjoyable.
I love that. from IQ to EQ to PSQ. It's like the evolution of, and but you're right. It's amazing because you can be. I mean, there are super intelligent people that are stressed and anxious and have depression and stuff. You can be emotionally, I guess fit, but still are having issues and problems in terms of relationships and stuff. So it is, and I think the test that you have available on the website can tell us all, how we doing. And you know what?
Yeah.
That's a good start for us. And frankly, folks, if you're watching and you are the high achiever, you want the success in life, and you want to be, you know, uh, achieving all the power stuff that you are aiming for, and make it fulfilling. I think the key is to get to that happiness. But if you're not sure how, Max is the man to go to. And so Max, I think you're it, man. They can certainly reach out to you. We'll have the actual link in the description of the show so people can actually connect directly in our website as well as in our media. So everywhere, they can, just click, you're a click away. And hopefully people can actually take advantage of this and work with you. And yeah, man, we just want to see people happier, better performer, and really just I mean, think about it this way. If we can get, 1% of this world in a happy level where they can, have a high PSQ, IQ, and EQ, then we're good. And I think that's all. That's
Absolutely.
the target. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All
And,
right.
and part of it is also like happiness is contagious, right? Emotions are contagious. And so you can spread misery or you can spread joy. And so investing in yourself, investing in your own happiness is actually the greatest service you can give to humanity. Because when you step into the most loving and abundant version of you, it's going to show up. You get home to your kids, it's going to show up in how you treat them. You go to your work, it's going to show up how you show up, as a leader. You go to your fitness team, it's going to show up how you interact with your colleagues and teammates. And so our job is to create happiness on the inside so we can make a better world for everyone in it.
Well, that's a power message right there. That's real power, and I'll leave it at that. I know we've way exceeded the time, but it was worth every second, of this particular chat. And again, Max, I want to thank you really for being on and kind of sharing your nuggets, your expertise, and certainly access. You are the resource. This is a resourceful network, and we want people to get access to as many people that can help them, just be better. And I think we can do that in this world, and we should all kind of thrive for helping others one way or the other, whatever we can. And sometimes this in itself can be a big, and by the way, if this is not for you folks, if you're watching and listening right now and you know someone that can benefit from this discussion, share it, and let's spread the love, as we're sharing is caring, right? So let's care for our loved ones. Well, Max, that's about it. That's the end of a show. Thank you so much for being with us, man. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much. That was such a blast. Wow.
Well, no, that's my pleasure, my honor. And so that's it, folks. We're at the end of the show. We'll be talking to a new day, new show, new topic. Bye for now.
Bye for now.